Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And it's that time again. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of year where I take a look at the biggest hit songs of the year and pick out the top 10 best and the top 10 worst to the complete indifference of artists, producers, and fans alike. Sounds like fun, eh? Okay, so let's get this party on the roll, and I think the best place to start is at the absolute bottom. That's right, the top 10 worst hit songs of 2013. Now first, some ground rules. For one, a song will only ever make this list if it debuted on the Billboard Hot 100 year-end chart this year. Now, of course, there are holdovers that I dislike from last year, but they had their chance already to pop up on my 2012 list. And I'm only ever choosing songs from this year-end list from Billboard. Of course, there were worse tracks that I covered in my album reviews, but I want to make the point that not only are these songs aggressively terrible, they're also humongously popular and impossible to escape throughout the course of this year. And here's one other thing to keep in mind. For a song to reach my list, it has to actively annoy or irritate me in some way, and simply being boring, well, that's often not enough to propel a song into my line of fire. The year-end charts, after all, are less aggressively bad than they are just boring, and this year had that problem more than previous years, mostly because the indie boom lost a lot of momentum and mainstream radio had no idea what to replace it with. And that meant that large tracks of this year were dominated by slow jams, increasingly interchangeable in EDM, listless hip-hop, and a disco revival that came out of nowhere and probably won't last. But then again, that's not saying that there weren't songs that really pissed me off, so let's begin by tackling some dishonorable mentions, shall we?
Throw it up, throw it up. Watch it out.
Now, when I reviewed Rihanna's terrible 2012 album, Unapologetic, I was more focused on the highly questionable practice of featuring songs that were obviously trying to cash in on the drama of Rihanna and Chris Brown. Now, fortunately for my sanity, none of those songs were ever released as singles, and Chris Brown had a really bad year on the charts. But instead, from Rihanna, we got this pandering waste of time. At this point, look, I've lost the ability to be shocked by Rihanna shoving her naughty bits in my face, and I'm more exasperated by this song than actively repulsed. The writing is terrible, the production is even worse, but look, at least Rihanna's trying and the song is a pulse. And really, having listened to my fair share of dumb, obnoxious luxury brag rap, Rihanna's effort here, it's far from the worst of it this year.
What does the fuck say?
Look, yes, I know it's a song with different cultural roots, and I get that the humor might not click as well with me as it did with its Norwegian audiences. But look, it still comes across as juvenile to me, and that's no excuse for a song to have such grating instrumentation over the choruses or a selection of increasingly migraine-inducing vocal calls. And besides, I thought the furries already told us what the fox says. The fox yiffs. There, I solved your song. You know, it's a sad thing when Justin Bieber is the saving grace of a song, but after listening to Will.i.am's abortion of Titanic proportions earlier this year, I can't say that I hate #ThatPower with the same force that I reserve for the rest of that album. Now, make no mistake, the song still blows, but you know what? It's got a halfway decent hook, and while Will.i.am's verses are utterly brainless and terrible, they don't actively offend me and can be fairly easy to ignore. Although I will stress this, any critic that compares #ThatPower to the excellent track Power by Kanye West needs to have their head examined, preferably with a 2x4. Now, I've already said my piece about Miley's eventful year, but the reason We Can't Stop as a dishonorable mention lies more in the lifeless production, Miley's vocals, and the fact that this song completely fails to be the good time party song it's trying to be. It's a song about doing cocaine and Molly, and yet it feels like I'm watching Requiem for a Dream. For as much as Miley tries to make partying sound awesome, the song doesn't have the energy of TikTok and ends up trying to shock in the crudest possible way. And look, that sort of shock doesn't affect me anymore. Also, this particular song brought twerking into the cultural lexicon. I don't think we, as a society, we didn't need that. Ugh. Taylor Swift, you are not Kesha, and dressing like hipsters and trying to pretend that the cool kids don't listen to your sterile music and then hooking up with a guy who looks like bad news will not make this song any better or less instantly dated. I'm more amused by how incredibly stupid this song is rather than anything close to angry. I remember when I reviewed Believe way back in the summer of 2012, I thought this song was close to so bad it's good territory with the asinine lyrics and instrumental mashup that Bieber's personality, well, that couldn't redeem anything, and a completely ridiculous verse from Nicki Minaj that sounds both unfinished and completely irrelevant a year later. But really, it's just a mess that'll be forgotten now that Justin Timberlake has thankfully returned and swept Bieber back into irrelevance. Good riddance.
Con los terroristas.
This song shouldn't have even charted. The only reason it hit the Hot 100 at all, let alone as high as it did, was because Billboard finally decided to factor in YouTube data this year, and then implemented the change right in the middle of a ridiculous internet meme exploding. This song spent 5 weeks at the top of Billboard's Hot 100, almost entirely thanks to YouTube. But putting aside the stupid reasons why this song is on this list, I still find it absolutely insufferable thanks to trap production that become heavily overused throughout the course of this year and not used well, a synth line that does nothing interesting but just change tempo, and a sound somewhere between that of a demonic belch and a clogged drain. There are some memes that I can find tolerable. This was not one of them. Okay, so that takes care of the riffraff, so let's get to the real stars of the show, shall we? Number 10. Okay, for some reason, I'm still the only country music critic on YouTube, so I feel somewhat uniquely qualified to speak on the turbulent year that country music has had. The Billboard year began mostly saturated with lightweight pop country, courtesy of acts like Taylor Swift and Carrie Underwood in the band Perry. Even male country acts weren't exactly blowing the door down, instead sticking with softer, mid-tempo material that wasn't about to offend anyone or anything. Then this happened. Thinks I actually used to be a fan of you, like Shelton. And you know, I think deep down I still am. But this song still infuriates me. I'll give him credit for making a country rap song that doesn't sound terribly produced and actually has some real guitar presence, but the lyrics are sleazy and leering. Blake Shelton spends his rap sounding bored or smug, and the song completely wastes the talents of the Pistol.Annies. Blake, I know Miranda Lambert is your wife, so why didn't you give her something to do other than just fill the hot girl in the video role? What, were you afraid that she'd actually show you up like she did on nearly every other single she released this year? Look, Boys Round Here might not have been the first country rap song to have ever been released, but it was the one that got popular by catering to the lowest possible common denominator of both genres, and along with Cruise, was responsible for cementing bro country dominance of this year. Blake, you're better than this. And if it wasn't for the fact that you actually have some charisma, this song would be a lot higher. Number 9. Okay, I've mentioned a number of times throughout this year that I'm not a big fan of white guys with acoustic guitars. It's just a musical affectation that kind of turns me off. And after the response of the John Mayer review, I decided it'd probably be in my best interest to avoid most of the genre altogether. I didn't review Jack Johnson's new album for precisely that reason, and frankly, nobody was asking me to, so why the hell would I bother? Yet, I have to admit some degree of surprise that there aren't more acoustic ballads that charted on the Hot 100 this year. This is primarily the year of the easy-listening piano ballad, and most of those were actually better than I expected, or were at least inoffensive. And you know, hell, while I can't exactly forgive Ed Sheeran for giving little things to One Direction, he's at least trying to go in a modestly interesting direction that I don't find offensive. And it's a shame that the newest arrival to this particular genre isn't nearly as strong as he is.
You only need the light when it's burning low.
I'll admit that this song doesn't fill me with the same coursing rage that I still have with I Won't Give Up by Jason Mraz, but that's more because I'm just stunned by the incompetence on display in the lyrical department on this song. It's a song that runs to the done to death theme of you don't know what you have until it's gone, and then proceeds to frame the entire song as talking to a friend who Passenger proceeds to mercilessly berate with lines like, everything you touch surely dies, because clearly whoever Passenger is talking to is such a toxic presence to this girl that he just must let her go to save her from himself, and oh dear God, I can hear the Simple Plan wailing in the background already. The problem here in this song is framing. If Passenger was talking about himself, perhaps, it'd be emo and whiny, but it could at least potentially sound tortured or interesting. But Passenger frames the song at least talking to the second person. It's you he's talking to, so you have to wonder why he's trying to convince this this guy to dump this girl. And given the typical mission statement of white douches with acoustic guitars, my mind immediately drops into thinking that Passenger is just trying to get the girl for himself, but you know what, that's just conjecture. I'll admit that. Conjecture that I made mid-song because the bland, half-written track and Passenger's refusal to stray outside of less than 1 octave bored me to tears. If Ed Sheeran's The A-Team is doing acoustic material right, Passenger's Let Her Go is just doing it all wrong. Next, number 8. I only have one question for you, Taylor. If you knew he was trouble when he walked in, why did you hook up with him?
'Cause I knew you were trouble when you walked in.
If there was a song that cemented Taylor Swift selling out to a pop audience, it was this one. And as somebody who actually kind of really likes Speak Now, Red represents a fundamental betrayal of the ideals that Taylor Swift once stood for. And this wretched mess of a song was the finishing blow. A dubstep-inspired train wreck that showcased Taylor Swift at her absolute worst. It's telling when a GOAT remix actually makes the song better. I'll give her credit for actively selling her heartbreak and adequately framing the song so that she was the one who kind of screwed this up by approaching the asshole in question. But the sheer rationale for the song is predicated on her sheer stupidity. She knew he was trouble when he walked in. Her first impression immediately told her that this was a really, really bad idea, and yet she did it anyway. But then again, I have a hard time buying into Taylor Swift's version of the events on why this guy is such a terrible person. Apparently, Taylor came on too strong, he took a cautious step back, decided to leave her and move on, and Taylor needs all the sloppy and weightless pop dubstep in the world to deal with her endless pain. But the real clinching moment comes in the bridge where she just screams that he never loved me or her or anyone or anything. Look, Taylor, as much as you would like to paint this asshole as a cartoon character, this lyric is so overwrought that I can't help but just groan with exasperation, which I will do now. Ugh. Taylor, you chose to hook up with him even though you knew he was trouble from the start. I have so very little sympathy for you here. If you chase after guys like that and throw yourselves at them, ladies, you're gonna end up getting heartbroken. You should know this by now, Taylor Swift. You've had enough relationships. And none of the poor man's Skrillex instrumentation is going to make you any more tolerable or sympathetic here. Next, number 7. Now, 2013 was the year that EDM music rose to prominence for the mainstream, for better or for worse. Now, the dance music had left the clubs and exploded into the festival scene, swapping out the liquor for Molly and attempting to find meaning and love in broader, more existential concepts than just on the dance floor. And while club DJs like Calvin Harris and David Guetta easily managed the transition, some of the former club boom stars weren't nearly so lucky. What, you want proof?
One day while the light is glowing.
I said that last year that I couldn't muster up any real hatred for Pitbull anymore. At least he's bragging when he sounds like a lecherous twit with limited rhyming skills. At least he's enthused about it. But his Men in Black 3 theme song made my list last year, and Feel This Moment gets on the list this year for the exact same reason. The song is a stunningly incompetent mess. None of the pieces fit together, mostly because Pitbull's lightweight, interchangeable, poorly written brag rap just does not match the soulful chorus that Christina Aguilera is trying to sell. And at this point, Christina's vocal delivery is in line with a poor woman's Beyonce. Forceful and strident, but devoid of any real emotional presence that really gets to me. Oftentimes it feels like I'm just getting hit with a brick. And it doesn't help matters that the production and mix are a total wash. The backbeat is thin and choppy, the payoff to the crescendo is severely lacking, and the synth line? Well, that's sampled wholesale from the 80s synth pop classic Take On Me by a-ha, seemingly only because it's a synth riff that everybody already knows. The song does nothing with the sample. There's no recontextualization, and the transition to the fuzzier keyboards, the riff loses all the tightness that made the original so defiantly memorable. This is the same problem that Pitbull ran into when he sampled Love Is Strange for Back in Time, and it appears he's learned nothing from it. I might not be the biggest fan of Flow Rida, but when he sampled Brenda Russell's Piano in the Dark for I Cry, he at least showed more effort and went outside the box further than this mess. Frankly, this song smacks of a total lack of effort. Pitbull hastily jumping onto a craze to ride it out as long as he can and stay relevant. And with Timber, his Folktronica collaboration with Kesha, I'm guessing that trend isn't likely to change with him. Ugh. And speaking of a lack of effort, number 6. By this point, I've said more than enough about this particular fellow. The only reason I'm not posting my old review of his toxic, faux Warholian advertisements masquerading as dance music is because he doesn't deserve any more real attention anywhere, and putting more effort into discussing his abysmal music will be a waste of everybody's time, including mine. It doesn't mean he's not making my list, though.
I wanna scream and shout.
So, in the spirit of not trying that Will.i.am so appropriately embodies, I'm gonna copy what I said 8 months ago about this song when I suffered through #willpower, because it all still applies. That big hit with Britney Spears that has one of the most annoying electronic hooks in radio right now. For me, it's the instrumentation and Britney's awful singing that does more to sink the song than the lyrics, but it still didn't stop me from finding this gem where Britney repeats ad nauseum, "When you hear this in the club, you're gonna turn this shit up, you're gonna turn this shit up, you're gonna turn this shit up." Quick question from the peanut gallery here, Britney. How the hell can I turn up the music in the club when I'm not the DJ? And if I was the DJ, I could tell you I'd be playing better tracks than this Drek. And you know what? All that's still true, but for me, the issue is effort. Neither Will.i.am or Britney sound like they're trying or that they care that this song is playing. And the lyrics are beyond asinine, vaguely partyish words crammed together into a homogeneous mass of arrogance and non-efforts, all set against a sterile beat with not a hint of texture. Even by the standards of dance music, this song fails to do anything to inspire me to dance or really move at all. So it's a failure on every level. And believe it or not, that song wasn't the worst on that album. Yeah, process that for a little bit of second here. Next, number 5. You know, Zach Brown said that this was the worst song he had ever heard. For me, it's only number 5 on this list of hits. And let's believe me this, it earned that slot.
All them other boys wanna ride you.
If Blake Shelton represented one of the first instigators of bro country this year, Luke Bryan came at its apex, or at least I hope it was the apex, with a song that I mostly ignored when I reviewed his album Crash My Party, under the belief that no record executive would be moronic enough to release that song as a single. Turns out my faith in the country music establishment was misguided, because That's My Kind of Night turned out to be a huge hit for Luke Bryan. It also shouldn't be much of a surprise that it sucks as much as it does. A turgid slurry of the worst and stupidest of both hip-hop and country. Luke Bryan's a passable singer, but his dour smugness screams of obnoxious machismo, focused solely on the gratification of Luke Bryan and no one else. And that's before we get into the lyrics, which are overloaded with pandering to the shallowest of the both luxury rap and country music, solely to pander to the demographic who somehow thinks that drunken, sloppy, outdoor sex in a river that's running dry is somehow a good thing. And even with that, you can't tell me that that demographic would listen to a mixtape of T-Pain and Conway Twitty. But really, where this song fails most is in the instrumentation and the production. Really, where to goddamn start? The sterile drum machines, the clunky melody line has no flow, the guitars that lack all flavor, the backing vocals that sound terribly out of place with Luke Bryan's baritone, the auto-tune, the production that squelches it all into an ugly mess that has no presence, texture, or raw power. It's a song pandering to those who only want the most gutless, featureless, worthless bro country from the songwriting pen of the man who wrote Honky Tonk Badonkadonk. Look, I can only hope that the bro country trend dies a painful death in the upcoming months, because at this point, I think its net worth has been exhausted. Next! Number 4. Now, earlier this year, I spent an entire review trying to understand why this particular artist was popular. In the end, I don't think I came to much of a conclusion. And considering that this guy has been everywhere on the charts this year, or at least in mainstream hip-hop music this year, there isn't really much of an excuse for me not to come to any sort of coherent answer, and I apologize for that. But then again, there's no excuse for this song to exist. 2 Chainz, where's my apology?
Different, yeah, I'm different. I'm different.
You know, what's kind of baffling to me is how this song fails so much on principle alone. It's a song with 2 Chainz bragging that he's different, and then he spends the entire song talking about money, brand names, and having sex. So the song is a lie right out of the gate, reiterating cliches that 2 Chainz' sloppy flow and bad songwriting screw up right out of the gate. And while none of the punchlines are egregiously offensive, we'll get to those, the laziness on display is borderline unbelievable. Punchlines go nowhere. The hashtag rap at the end of the first verse kills the flow and still comes across as somehow as unbelievably stupid. And what's worse, As you can tell that 2 Chainz is drawing inspiration from other bad rappers. The bed springs squeaking are a reference to Trillville's worthless luxury rap hit from 2005, Some Cut, leading to lines where references to sex were described as saying, beating it up. Nice work conflating sex with violence, asshole. And yet, once again, the worst part is the instrumentation. That is, if you can even call it that. A creepy, off-kilter piano line that certainly doesn't inspire images of money or success. A percussion line that has no presence whatsoever. A synth line that sounds extraordinarily cheap and processed. And the omnipresent gang vocals that have become such a cliche in rap music that they don't have the slightest element of force. I get that it's minimalist, but it's focusing on a rapper who spends the entire song lying to us and doing it badly. And furthermore, is there anyone else here that thinking that nobody's having any fun? If 2 Chainz is rapping about being a gangsta, I'd understand it. But this is luxury rap. He should aim to at least sound opulent or powerful, at least try to inspire those emotions. This sounds like it was recorded in about 2 hours with equipment you'd find in a dumpster. And worst of all, none of it has any energy or presence or even a good dance beat. I'd say it was an example of rappers taking themselves way too seriously. But at this point for 2 Chainz, I think his only escape right now from the turgid pit of mediocrity and awfulness is humor. And the fact that he's at least having some fun in this track, even if I'm not, saves it from a slot lower on this list. Speaking of which, number 3. I said last year, in my list of the top 10 worst hit songs of 2012, that the one thing you could do to throw yourself high on this list is to be an act I like and then disappoint me. And those of you who have watched my earlier reviews and have any idea of what charted this year have probably already guessed that this song was gonna end up on this list. Drake, you are capable of so much better.
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
You know, I'm not sure I'm actually going to be able to entirely forgive Drake for encouraging the trend of energyless, empty luxury rap on the charts, but at least on his album, Nothing Was the Same, he occasionally peppered his material with insight or impassioned hooks that make you believe that he actually gave a damn. And yeah, I'll admit that Canadian hip-hop production can be bleak, but there's a difference between atmospheric and minimalist and the artlessly pretentious. If this song was supposed to make me feel any sort of passion for Drake's struggle to the top, it fails utterly because the instrumentation is so dreary and lifeless. Producer Mike Zombie seems to be trying to throw in hi-hats and gang vocals or anything to lend the song some form of energy, but nothing elevates it because the melody hook is submerged underneath the rest of the mix, and it's the same loop that doesn't evolve or change over the entire goddamn song. But then again, it's minimalist. It's all supposed to be focused on Drake, and yet he's got nothing new to say. We keep hearing Drake rapping about coming up from nothing since 2009, and this song adds nothing new to the story other than assert Drake's precious ego when he tries to assert himself with raps that barely rise above average. And as much as Drake likes to pretend that he's above it all, his own song betrays him in this regard. Does a man secure in his fame and success wear all his chains even when he's in his own house when there's nobody there to see his fame other than him? Do you really need such shallow reinforcement when you're supposedly so great and so successful and so above the haters? If you don't care about them and those who didn't buy into your story of really coming from the bottom, why do you bother to time and time again draw attention to it? And why do the songs keep getting worse? Look, if this song had any purpose besides bravado, it must only be for Drake himself. And even with that, why would you make something for yourself that has so little presence or energy and only charted because low-tempo ballads and hollow-sounding brag raps were for some reason popular this year? And yet, believe it or not, this wasn't the worst track that Drake was associated with this year. Number 2. You know, Drake and Lil Wayne have one major thing in common. They're both capable of some startlingly smart and insightful music with clever wordplay and glimpses of real intellect. This, on the other hand,
My bitches love me, my bitches love me, my bitches love me.
I'll have to say this, nothing about the song works for me. Nothing! The synth is sludgy, eerie sounding trap courtesy of terrible producer Mike Will made it, and somehow manages to sound aggressively creepy and yet boring as hell. The percussion has no presence, and none of this has a coherent or a memorable melody line. After listening to the song for almost a year, I still can't make out what the hook is. On top of that, what was the point of hiring both Drake and Future when the former wasn't going to try and rap and the latter was just going to keep failing as one of the worst providers of hooks in 2013? This was the song that apparently deluded record executives into thinking that Future deserved more airplay. And unlike what fellow auto-tune abuser T-Pain, you'd be lucky to find any personality from this guy that wasn't bland or absolutely loathsome. But really, if we just wanted the latter, we'd just stick around for Lil Wayne's verses. Now let me clarify this out of the gate. I'd say I've never been a fan of the guy. That Carter 3 is awesome, to be fair. He's made good albums, but he's made bad albums. And for the most part, I'll accept though that he's not my thing. One thing he's been known to do is not write his lyrics down, and well, you want to go back to my Deer Hunter review to see how much I feel about that particular method of delivering lyrics. But just as I said about Bradford Cox, Lil Wayne's choice to not write his lyrics down, it's backfiring on him, because Love Me is just sloppy on a technical level, with a simplistic grasp of meter and punchlines, plus rhyming words with themselves, and you know what, he's capable of better. And that's before we get to lyrical content, and god damn it. I don't like talking about misogyny in rap music, but these lyrics, they really can't be explained by anything else, or at least by a warped obsession with the women that Lil Wayne would brand as whores. Lines like, "Baby, just make me come, then just don't make a sound," after the woman tries to say that she just wants to make him proud. Or just saying that these hoes love me like Satan. Or can't treat these hoes like ladies, man. Or all my bitches love me and I love all my bitches, but it's like as soon as I come to my senses. None of these lines suggest any sort of a healthy relationship with women or even with one-night stands. And certainly nothing anything close to any sane definition of love. This is lust. Pure and simple. And you know what, if it was framed as lust, it would be fine, but since he's using the word love and framing the song like he's presenting affection, we're expected to buy into Lil Wayne presenting this as attractive or romantic, at least by his standards. And the sad fact is that there will be female fans of Lil Wayne who will buy into these regressive and reprehensible gender politics. Or even worse, male fans who will perpetuate this sort of behavior because, hey, it's working for Lil Wayne. Except it isn't. Lil Wayne really did not have a good 2013, and this song is one of the reasons why. It's sleazy, it's gross, and the sex that Lil Wayne tries to describe in the song makes me feel kind of slightly revolted. And yet, even with all that, it wasn't the song to reach the top of that list. So with that, number 1. If you've been following controversies in the music world throughout this year, you should already know what this song is. If you haven't, oh boy, we got ourselves a doozy. Now before we get to the controversy, let's start with the obvious problems, the obvious mini problems with this song, which is yet another lifeless luxury rap where nobody remotely sounds like they're enjoying themselves. The synth line is somehow even worse than the previous 3 songs, completely lacking in any sort of presence. And what's worse is that there isn't any sort of heavy percussion or gang vocals, or at least something interesting to emphasize how much of this song is just a sterile, energyless waste of time. The lack of effort extends to the title too. The acronym really means nothing. It's simply the sound you get when you slur or auto-tune the words you don't even know together, like Future does on the hook. That's right, people. The song's title is derived from a bad pronunciation and is effectively meaningless. That's a nice start, isn't it? What's worse is that than the meaningless title, you know what? It also happens to be a lie. The line follows the majority of the bragging, implying that these guys, they've got money, they got cars, and they got brand names, and they got sex, and you can't possibly fathom it. So yeah, great. Another group of artists who think it's classy to talk down to their fan base. Charming. But wait, let's make this a little bit simpler. If you brag about something and immediately follow it with the line, "You don't even know it," well, that lyric is wrong, because we do know it now. You just told us! And really, what you're using to say that you're better than me? A collection of expensive brand names that make your song a walking commercial? I gave Jay-Z a lot of shit for Tom Ford, but that's nothing compared to this, where Rocko drops so many brands in his verse that it'd be criminal if he's not getting paid for endorsements, which he probably is. Of course, he's not getting paid much, at least not to the same amount now, thanks to this line from Rick Ross. "Put Molly on all her champagne, she ain't even know it. I took her home and I enjoyed that, she ain't even know it." In case you don't know, folks, That's called date rape. Rick Ross might not have intended to sound like that. He's admitted he doesn't say he didn't want it to sound like that. He might have thought that he was just showing Lady good time by putting Molly in her glass and then enjoying it with her so she ain't even know it the next morning. Look, any way you look at it, it just screams date rape. The implication of putting something in a woman's drink and then having sex with her and she's not aware of any of it is damn near despicable. And worse still is the fact that Rick Ross is framing it all in a verse where he's trying to emphasize how much better he is than you, which is yet another lie to add to the cavalcade of non-truth surrounding this song. Now, thankfully, Rick Ross apologized and said he never intended the rhyme to be read like that, but that implies a much bigger problem, that Rick Ross isn't thinking or trying when he's writing his material. He's so high on his cloud of undeserved ego and success that he didn't even think of the implications behind his music. And when it's this obvious, when it's this much in your face, it smacks of myopia, ignorance, laziness, and non-effort. And thus it's kind of cruelly ironic that when C-list artist Rocko dropped Rick Ross's verse in order to get more radio play and replaced him with all sorts of other rappers, the song sank like the lifeless turd that it is. So I'm gonna give this song the greatest honor it deserves. The worst hit song of 2013. You know what? It's a hilarious thing. 3 artists in question probably don't even know it. Good riddance. And let's hope for a better 2014 next year. See you next time.